Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We're coming to you live on March 3rd, 2026. If any of you have yet to attend a Cathedra webinar before today, our webinars get their name from the Greek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning steps to starting a nonprofit organization from your instructor, Vince Franco. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also happy you could tune in for the webinar with us today. If you could follow along while I read the disclaimer aloud, this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. This is just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. Moving forward, if you want to return to the course, perhaps to watch the recording or share the resource with a colleague or a friend, you can find everything housed in the courses section under the course Steps to Starting a Nonprofit Organization. And Vince prepared a great list of resource materials for you, and those can be found in the courses section as well. And I also have links to them in the shared notes. I'll go over that in a little bit. If you opt to join us for a future webinar, know that you can join by logging in like you did today. And when you see that green banner at the top of the screen, that means a live webinar is happening, and you'll just click on that green banner to join like you did today. We do ask that you join with listen-only capabilities. Let me mute somebody right now because it helps to cut down on audio feedback for the recording. We are recording the webinar currently. And if you joined and found that your sound is coming out of the wrong device, maybe you are trying to listen through your earbuds or through a Bluetooth speaker, you could come down to the bottom of your screen where I have a telephone icon. You might have a headphone icon, but either way, if you click on that, it will bring up a list of your speaker devices and you can select the proper audio output. While we do ask you to join on mute so that we're not having any issues with the recording, we do, of course, still encourage class participation. We want to know your questions. We want to hear your comments, certainly any tech support issues that I can try to help you navigate through. And we'll rely primarily on the public chat for that. If you don't yet have it open, you can go over to that gray messages column that's in the left-hand side of the screen and click on public chat. That'll open up a chat between you, the webinar attendees, me, the NLC staff, and Vince, your instructor for today. All you got to do if you want to ask a question or make a comment is just come down here to the box that says send message to public chat, type what you'd like to say or ask, and then you can either hit enter or you could click on the little paper airplane button and that'll send it in where everyone can see it. Just below public chat, you can also open up the shared notes section. That's what I mentioned earlier. We have a bunch of helpful links in there. So we have a link to the webinar feedback survey, a link to today's presentation slides. Although I did already put that for you in the chat, I can do so real quick once again. And then there are links to all the great resource items that Vince put together for you. But again, those can be found in the courses section later when you come back on. There's also links that are found throughout the presentation, but know that I'll copy and paste those into the chat as they come up. We'd love if you got the public chat going together by taking a moment to introduce yourselves. You could let us know your name, where you're tuning in from. It's always fun to see all the different tribal nations that are represented on the webinar. Your work or your role in Indian country. It might have led you to the webinar today, or you might just be here for personal information. You could also let us know your tribal affiliation. If you have one, you might be someone who is a tribal employee and you do not have your own tribal affiliation. That's okay. Don't worry, you are welcome also. And then just a quick final note while y'all are introducing yourselves into the public chat. You want to try to avoid clicking on this red menu column that's all the way to the left side of your screen. You might not have yours expanded like mine is in the picture. Yours might just be the little icons. But either way, it is going to immediately take you to whatever you clicked on the menu, and it's going to pull you out of the webinar. If that happens, no worries. You can always just click on the green banner once again to get back in. But I just want to give you a heads up because it can be kind of jarring. All right, while you're introducing yourselves in the chat, it is with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructor for today, Vincent Franco. And Vince, I have made you presenter now.
All right. Thank you, Brooke. Can you hear me, Brooke?
Yes, coming through loud and clear, Vince.
Okay, very good. Then I'm going to just double check, make sure I can move the slides, which I can. Thank you, Brooke, for the wonderful introduction, as always. And one thing I want to reiterate that Brooke had mentioned, and that is the link to this presentation. Folks, there's going to be a lot of information taken here. I know you're going to be taking some notes, which I recommend. and trying to follow along. Where there's a lot of moving parts to starting a nonprofit. And I want to make sure that you're comfortable and you understand the process. So you might, as Brooke had mentioned, you might have to go back and look at or watch and listen to this webinar more than once. And that's fine. Use it as a reference. If you have any questions or concerns that cannot be addressed today because they are just a little more complicated, you can always reach out to the Native Learning Center. You can reach out to Brooke, and she will forward those questions or concerns to me, and then I will get back and try to answer those questions for you in a very quick and reasonable amount of time. That's usually the way that we deal with these type of things. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start moving through the presentation and start giving you this information. This is steps to starting what's referred to by the IRS as a nonprofit organization. Nonprofit is a classification that the IRS determines on our behalf. You are not a nonprofit organization until the IRS basically tells you so. You are going through the motions, so to speak, as an identity that wants to be a nonprofit. So you have to be careful about how you refer to yourself as we go along this process. You're really not a nonprofit until the government says you're a nonprofit. But I want to show you how to do that. This presentation is really about the fundamental steps of starting the nonprofit. Not so much operating one. That's a whole nother presentation yet to be put together. It can be, but about, how to operate a successful nonprofit. That's a different animal than what we're trying to accomplish here. Here I'm talking about the fundamentals that needs to be at least considered for a want-to-be nonprofit organization to be recognized. So let's move on. This is a little bit about my organization. I was with Seminole Tribe of Florida, the Native Learning Center, for a number of years, retired about 3 years ago, and now even in retirement still perform some of this training. So a little bit about my company there. So here's what we're really going to try to accomplish. 4 major things in this presentation as I move through here in kind of a slow and methodical approach. At the very top, it says start, develop. Probably one of the most important things you can do is to have a clear purpose, vision, and mission. At least at a minimum, have some kind of idea of what you want to do as a nonprofit. You got to think that through. And we'll talk about developing a purpose, mission, and vision very, very quickly. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Step 2, to the right, it says establish and register a name, a recognized name in the state. And we're going to talk about the difference between what you're going to do at a state level. So we'll talk about both those things. But when you register a name for an entity that wants to be a nonprofit, that is done at the state level. All right, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about incorporation, which is an option that nonprofits can pursue, being incorporated. Articles of incorporation for nonprofits, EIN, employer identification number, even though you might not have any employees. It's a process through the IRS that I strongly recommend. It's very simple, and I'll explain that to you. And then also developing bylaws, which is done. That's a very internal and very personal type of thing. It's done on a local level. This is something that you and your colleagues would do, develop bylaws, your operational structure, so to speak. All right, bottom of the screen there talks about number 3, and that is selecting a board, what's commonly referred to in nonprofits as a board of directors. In other words, the folks that are going to lead the organization and make policy decisions for the organization. board of directors, conducting a meeting, approving the structure of the organization. So we'll talk about that. Some very important things that the board of directors has to do very, very early on in the infancy of the organization. And then lastly, there, number 4 on the far left, it talks about the final approach, so to speak, developing a funding plan, and also pursuing the technical version of the nonprofit status, which the IRS considers to be, for most practical purposes, a 501 classification. In most cases, it's going to be a 501, what's referred to as a 501c3 charitable nonprofit. That is what we're trying to achieve here, is that classification through the IRS and the steps that must be followed and mechanisms that must be put in place to get that classification. And then lastly, once we get that classification, 501c3, then the benefits that come with it, state sales tax exemption, donations that can be written off on taxes, both the nonprofit taxes and the donor taxes too. I think ultimately that's what we're trying to do. So we'll go, that's kind of the life cycle of the nonprofit organization, from an idea and an entity through the process to eventually become a nonprofit, charitable nonprofit recognized by the IRS and the state that you are operating in. That's what we're going to try to accomplish today. All right, let's keep going here. Again, as Brooke had mentioned in the chat box, if you have any questions or concerns on anything, or if I failed to explain anything or use too many acronyms, which is easy to do, let me know and I will try to answer those questions. But again, do not be concerned if this all doesn't make sense the first time. There's a lot of mechanics, moving parts to this, and it's going to take some time, to fully understand it. That is common. This is not a master's class in grant writing. This is more of procedural. Hello, Angelina. Housing Management, Northern Circle Housing Authority. Well, welcome here, and everyone else in the audience. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. All right, keep going here. As I said, questions and answers. We're going to start with that purpose, the vision, and the mission. So let's start there and talk about a couple of things about purpose, mission, and vision of the entity. I don't want to use the word organization yet. I certainly don't want to use the word nonprofit yet, because you might not be there. Remember, this is a series of processes that must be put in place and presented to the IRS to get that classification as a nonprofit. So again, just want to reiterate, you're not a nonprofit. You are not a nonprofit until the IRS identifies you as a nonprofit and you've met all the criteria. So please be careful in referring to yourself as a nonprofit when you're really not there yet. And I'm assuming this is all exploratory on most of your parts. If you're already working, you'll understand that this is the process that had to be put in place to get to that point. A couple questions here. What is the purpose of an organization or an entity that wants to become a nonprofit? And the answer, a couple of answers there. Answer number 1, according to the IRS, nonprofit organizations are intended basically to better the community by facilitating donations and grants into programs. Now, what do they mean by community? What do they mean by donations and grants? The community could be any group. It could be a tribal community. It could be college students. It could be veterans. It could be nurses. It could be just about anything. The community in this term is a catch-all phrase. The IRS is concerned that their big concern is that a nonprofit is not trying to become a profit organization. They're not trying to generate profit for stakeholders. but just the opposite. They're generating revenue that would be turned around in some way. They use the word donations and grants, or donations back to whatever that community function is. So the part of the purpose here for your organization or want to be nonprofit is to figure out who your clients are, who your what or who your community is, and what you're going to bring back to that community. Is it going to be in stipends or donations or contributions or paid tuition, scholarships, or paying program, or bus passes, or what is it going to be? That's part of the purpose. Number 2 says coordinating with the IRS. The purpose of a nonprofit organization, once you get to that point, is generally to improve the quality of life of that community, whatever that community is, for others in the community, be it local, state, or national, or even global levels. I assume we're working here on a local level and not so much on a state or national or global level. That's the job of the bigger, more established nonprofits. I would assume, for the most part, we're talking here about the tribal community or a subgroup within the tribal community as a whole. And that's fine. It can be as narrow and small as possible. In fact, that's the best approach to take. Start small and expand over time. All right, bottom of the page says some common nonprofit services include feeding, sheltering, medical aid, legal aid, advocacy, such as legal advocacy, and educational services and products. Those are typically, in very broad topics, what nonprofits do as far as a purpose. So keep going on, unless I see questions here. Can you add more into finding board members? Yes, Kimberly, that is about in the middle of the presentation. That's, you're getting a little bit ahead of me. We can't talk about board members until we talk about structure. We can't talk about structure until we talk about purpose, mission, and vision. And that's exactly where we are now, purpose, vision, and mission. So yes, I will get to that. It's a very important part of any nonprofit is the structure of board members. Good question. Good question. And I will certainly address that. Okay, vision. Vision is the you've got a purpose, hopefully, what you're going to do in this broadest sense. Vision and mission are the two next things. You don't necessarily have to have a vision. The IRS is going to ask you what your mission is. They want to know what you're going to do and that you are not a hobby. That is what the IRS is. One of the things they're concerned about, that you are serious about what you're doing. You're not a hobby. This is not a part-time thing that you're going to do on the weekends, that this is a legitimate entity and you're going through all the motions on a local level, state level, and even in some cases federal level to get established. So vision would be your long-term goals. Vision is where you see the organization, if you can, years down the road, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And there's a difference between the mission, which is what you're going to be focusing on right now, and the vision. Your mission is what you're doing today. Your vision is what you see your organization doing tomorrow, down the road, big picture. And you can see that little QR code in the bottom right, and above it, 10 mission and vision value statements. Just an example that you can look at. You can scan that with your smartphone. I think you could do it right now in real time. Scan that QR code and it'll take you to a nice little article and site on some examples of mission and vision. The real trick, if we can call it a trick, to purpose, vision, and mission. Purpose is big picture, so is mission. And the mission, as I said, mission statement is short term, is trying to keep it simple. It says in the second paragraph there, visions are your lofty, ambitious ideas, and they do not contain details or steps. They are big. Visions contain such things as we want to be the best we could be in providing food supplements to elderly people who need support, or stipends to college students that are in the tribal college that qualify for scholarships, or proceeds, something for veterans or homeless veterans, and to be specific, or as I saw here, since we're talking housing a little bit, housing activities for perhaps homeless tribal members. So both your purpose and your vision need to be kind of broad in scope, as it's saying here. When we get into the mission, we get a little, I think that might be one of the, here it is on the next screen here. The mission gets a little more specific. A good mission statement probably doesn't contain more than 10 to 15 words, so it's not very verbose. You don't want to make it too complicated, but as it says in the first sentence, it should explain in simple and concise terms what the purpose is, what the vision is, what you're doing today, such as the mission of the Native Learning Center is to provide training for tribal entities across the country. Not very, the best quality training related to housing. That is a very simple mission statement, no more than 10 words. Its vision, of course, would be to achieve and maintain the best quality training for housing activities moving forward in perpetuity. So see, the vision's a little bit bigger and broader. The mission is more focused. If you can go through these first 3 steps and working with individuals who are interested in your entity to try to figure out, as much without getting into the weeds, what your purpose, mission, and vision is, big picture, and that would be the vision, and what you're doing today being the mission, that will be very, very helpful. And keep this in mind. You'll need, especially mission, you'll need this information as you move forward in developing the nonprofit, not just in helping you get ideas, but actually submitting an application eventually to the IRS. As I said before, they're going to ask you at some point, what is your mission? And you better be able to explain it in an elevator ride from the first floor to the second floor. The old elevator explanation. If it's too complicated to do it in 10 seconds, 10 or 15 seconds, then it's just too complicated. Keep it simple. Your second sentence, your mission statement should be 1 or 2 sentences or a very, very short paragraph. And this is where I've seen want-to-be organizations that are both tribal and non-tribal who want to pursue nonprofit make big mistakes. They burden their mission statement. They list everything that should be in their bylaws into their mission statement, and their mission becomes so complicated. It seems like they're trying to do 15 different things. You want to keep it simple. Simple is the best approach. Keep it simple. You can always add on later. So your mission statement should be 1 or 2 sentences. Third sentence there, it should be clear and memorable within a length of no more than 20 words. Now, 20 words is from me. You can go to different sites. They might say 10, they might say 50. My goal is 20 words. If you can explain your mission in 20 words or less, you're moving in the right direction. You have one main focus. Do not complicate it. The mission statement should be designed to clearly communicate what you do, short-term, long-term, in a way that people can remember it and communicate it to others. The more complicated you get it, the more difficult it's going to be, not only for you and your potential board members to be able to operate the program, but it's going to be difficult for people to understand and share information. And you want people to share information, right? Because eventually those people might be not only involved in day-to-day activities, they might eventually be donors to your potential nonprofit. So very, very important. And I'll be referring to purpose, vision, and mission as we progress through the program. I wanted to lay the groundwork here. All right, a couple things on resources. There's a lot of, depending on what state you're in. Creating the nonprofit is the same, but yet it's different in all of the states. I was in Native Learning Centers in Florida, so is the Seminole Tribe of Florida. I'm in South Carolina right now. I can see from the list here, you folks are from all over the country. So there's a uniformity to starting a nonprofit that's the same. Obviously, purpose, mission, and vision is uniform. It's the same process. But when we start getting into the reports and generating processes on a state level, there again are some subtle differences. Some states are more, how do I say, user-friendly than others. The state of Florida, for example, is a very business-friendly state, even for nonprofits or wannabe nonprofits. It's very simple to start a company, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit in Florida. Some states are a little more complicated, but yet all of them share this same process. To register an entity, you need to identify in your state what's commonly referred to as the Department of State or the Secretary of State or the Department of Finance within your particular state. So first step, as it's indicating here on this screen, is try to identify the Secretary, or sometimes they're just called Department of State or Department of Finance in the state. Why? This is where you're going to have to go to register your entity, a name for your, and that's what we're going to get into in a few minutes, how to register a name. You've got a purpose, you've got a mission, vision, even though it's not fully defined, you want to take it. The next step is to come up with a name. And we do that and we lock in, so to speak, with creating a name through the Department of State, whether it's in Florida, in Tallahassee, whether it's in Charleston, South Carolina, or whether it's in Springfield, Illinois, or Oklahoma City. Doesn't matter, same process. So identify that entity within your state that handles profit, startups. Sometimes they call it starting a for-profit or starting a nonprofit organization within the state. That's what you're looking for. So a little homework for you to do that. Find out where you've got to go within the state. All right. Why? Why do you do that? Because if you want to take your entity from more than just an idea to a real entity that's recognized on a state level, you're going to need to select a name and register that name in your state. So whether it's Florida, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Illinois, California, whatever state you're in, you're going to go to the State Department or whatever department that handles startups and register your name. So let's keep going here. Organizational name, very, very important process, because you want to be able to, for several reasons. One, from just a recognizable perspective, you want to name your entity, also known as what this process is referred to as what's called in legal terms, a fictitious name, which is an odd, I know that's odd. Fictitious name sounds like it's not real, but that's what it's called, a fictitious name process with your state. Now, when we were in Florida and I started a nonprofit, I went to the State Department of State in Tallahassee, Florida. This is all online these days, of course. Went to the website, and went to the Department of State, as it says here, to register the name of the nonprofit or the entity. It's not a nonprofit yet. The entity, I wanted to select a name, and that's what it's talking about here. Come up with a name. You can go to the state, as it says here, it's a registered name under which a person or an entity is allowed to and is recognized as an entity that can transact business in the state. That's what you want. You want legal status to be recognized as an entity. You're not a nonprofit yet. You're just an entity trying to secure a name, just like your purpose and just like your mission, a name that's recognizable not too complicated, not too trendy, not too trendy because trends change, but recognizable and something that hopefully describes in 2 or 3 words what your entity is. Second paragraph, for entities, it means any enterprise or venture in which the enterprise sells or conducts business. Yes, that's what an entity, that's the legal definition of it. Okay, this is a required, at the bottom, this is a required process for incorporation. If you wanted to incorporate your nonprofit, we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's also a required process for registering your entity with the IRS as potentially becoming a nonprofit. So this is something that has to be done. Organizational name, for entities wanting to become a nonprofit, be sure to include in your name the term, or if you're going to end it, incorporation or corp, as it says there in that first paragraph. And let me explain what happens here. In all of the states, if you were pursuing a for-profit business, let's say you wanted to start a lawn service, you could name the company, I could call it Vince's Lawn Service Company. And it's that last word which the emphasis on, company, C-O-M-P-A-N-Y, company. The word company refers to a for-profit business, and both the state and the IRS will recognize the word company or C-O, when you abbreviate it, as a for-profit. So we don't want to use the word company ever when we're trying to describe a nonprofit. On the nonprofit side, if I wanted to create Vince Franco's nonprofit organization incorporated, I would use the word incorporated as I just did, or its abbreviation INC, Inc. So I want you to understand the difference. Incorporation is, if you're going to put that on the end, it's typically, you can use that for nonprofits. We do not use the word company. You don't hear the phrase Big Brothers, Big Sisters Company or United Way Company. They don't use that terminology. But Costco, for example, which is a big for-profit, is a company. So just a subtle thing there. Just want you to be aware of that. California Best Life, just an example, incorporated. That looks to me like a nonprofit organization. The name of the entity cannot contain certain words. So what are those words? This is where we go to the state. I'm sorry if you hear a lot of banging here. I'm having some construction done around here, so there's a lot of banging. Back to organizational name. Going to the state and selecting a name and locking in the name is important for several things, as I mentioned. Name recognition, being recognized at the state as as a real entity. You're not a nonprofit yet, but as an entity. Again, here's the definition. On the left, we got incorporation. On the right, we got companies. But let's see. I want to look at the next slide real quick. We want to go to the state. So if you're in Oklahoma, you go to the State Department. You go to the area on their website that says starting an entity, whether it be profit or nonprofit. You can register for that fictitious name. Select a name. First thing you want to do is make sure no one else in the state of Florida, if you're like I was, or South Carolina, or Oklahoma, Illinois, no one else has that name in the state that you want to do business in. So if you're in Oregon and you want to start a nonprofit, you go to the State Department, you go to their online search, you come up with a name, you come up with the name of your nonprofit. Hopefully it's original. It's no more than 3 or 4 words. And you search to make sure that two things. You search to make sure that name of your entity is not already taken or is not similar to another one that sounds just like it. In fact, I don't even think the state will allow you to name an entity that sounds similar to what's already been approved by the state. It has to be different. Real quick story. When I wanted to create a for-profit organization, I followed the same process. I wanted to call it Franco Associates because that's my last name, Franco Associates, LLC. I could not use my own last name and register it as an entity in the state of Florida at the time because Franco was already taken in several different variations. Franco this, Franco that, Franco this. I couldn't get it. I had to go completely out of the box, so to speak, and come up with something very, very different and very original. Here is where you might want to fall back on native words, native language that isn't too complicated, that isn't, a word that is too complicated for the average person to understand or to say properly. It's here's an example for you. Friends of mine from tribe Navajo, part of the Navajo tribe has the Dene, D-I-N-E, and Dene Community Development Corporation. They went with Dene because their whole population understands that. And a lot of people outside of the Navajo Nation understand that that is Navajo. But it's not really a complicated Navajo word, which can get very complicated. So they picked a word that was kind of related to the language, but not too complicated. And that might help separate and identifying a name that works for you. And once you find that, and there's nothing in the state that bars you from taking that name, my suggestion is lock in on it. Lock in, select the name. You do this all online. And this is the first time that you will be paying a fee. Most states will charge you a fee for doing this. It is not expensive. It's all online. When I say not expensive, I'm going to say less than $50. Now, one piece of suggestion I have for you, a couple things here. One is pay, once you lock in on a name that's reasonable, like none of the examples I have up on the screen, especially the ones in red at the top, which are goofy names, but they've been used, and the ones at the bottom that are borderline. A name that makes sense for your potential entity, almost a nonprofit. You want to lock in, pay the fee, and then what I would suggest is every state will ask you if you want to pay an additional fee to have your recognition at the state level recognized and notarized by the state. My recommendation, you don't have to do this, pay the additional fee. It's going to be $5 to $10. Not a big deal, but it gives more credibility to your organization. Secondly, they're going to ask you if you want a document from the state with a raised seal. So it's going to be notarized, stamped, and look official. Do you want to pay the extra 10 or 15 bucks to have that? Yes. Say yes. Pay the additional fee. Why? You will get a week later, you will get acknowledgement attached to an email. You will receive your acknowledgement. You will receive an attachment as a PDF of your certified name of your entity and the notarized version. You print it out on heavy stock if you wish to. If you have a physical bricks and mortar, post it on the wall, frame it, make multiple copies of it, electronically and hard copy, and keep those in the beginning of your board of directors book. I want you to start a board of directors book where you're going to keep all these important documents, the acknowledgement of your name, the acknowledgement of your purpose and your mission. That's the second. Well, actually, that's the first thing. Your name is the second thing, and the acknowledgement from the state. Follow me on this. Two very important things, and this is going to follow you through the process. So you've got a purpose, vision, and mission. That's step one. Step two, register your name, research your name first. If you find something that's suitable, lock in, pay the fee, get the notarized version. You're going to pay between 50 and 75 bucks for that name to lock in. Very, very important process. So your name is not plagiarized or taken, or you have recourse. You want recourse on this. And of course, as you move down the process and eventually to nonprofit status, IRS is going to want to know what your name is, when you filed for it, and any other tracking number that comes with it. So this is a process that is not mandated, but strongly recommended. Questions on that? Two very important things so far. We're laying the foundation here, folks. We talked about the organizational name, aka fictitious name. We go to the Secretary of State. In this one says California, but it would be wherever you're at. You want to go to the State Department. They're all called the State Department or Department of Finance, whatever. Here's more on organizational name. I have some resources. You saw resource A, resource B. Both of those are attachments that give you information on purpose, mission, and vision, and also organizational name. Please take a look at that at your leisure. All right, so we got step 1 and step 2 done. You've got hopefully, or you're working on your purpose, your vision, and your mission. That's step 1. Those 3 things, A, B, and C within step 1. Step 2, A and B of step 2. Research a name. Once you've determined what your name is, research the name within the state that you're going to operate on. And if you find it, lock in on it. Pay the fee to the state, register your name so you are legit. You'll be then recognized as a legitimate entity. Pay the fee, and keep in mind that every year the state's going to come back to you the first week of January of every subsequent year and ask you if you're still operational, if you're still in existence. You will answer yes, and you will pay that annual fee. It's called an operations fee, and it usually from state to state it's different, but basically it's a fee, and it's going to be on an annual basis somewhere between 100 and 150 bucks. Florida, it's 125. South Carolina, it's about the same, but it could vary. But anyway, it's an annual fee. Pay that. Be aware that every January, the state will want to know that. And if you don't get an email, go to the state. Go to the same place you were at to register your name and look for what's called the annual fee for nonprofits, and make sure that, or annual report, make sure you look for that every January. Okay, assuming we're going to move forward in this process. Okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. Now we're shifting gears a little bit. We're going to go to the IRS, but not to ask for IRS determination as a nonprofit. You're not ready for that yet. What you're going to do with the IRS early on here is to apply for what's called an EIN number, employer identification number. You might not ever have an employee for your soon-to-be nonprofit. That's okay. An employer identification number there's no fee for it. It's a process that tells the IRS, so now you're on a federal level, tells the IRS that you are a nonprofit entity. No, it doesn't tell them you're a nonprofit. You're not there yet. It tells them you're a legitimate entity in the state and that you might be employing people at some point. Do this now, because what will happen, see if I have it on the next slide. All right, we're going to go to the IRS. Here's just a QR code. I'm going to take it. And let me see if I have it here. There it is, right here. Hopefully, there's a lot of stuff on this screen. You're going to the IRS, and IRS.gov, and what you're going to do in the search engine once you get to that site is enter what it says in the top left. IRS Form SS4, which is the EIN number application. It looks overwhelming. It is not. All that blue at the top is your name. Hopefully you're approved. You're not going to do this until you get your acknowledgement from the state that your name is actually approved. That is your legitimate name now. You would enter your legitimate, or as they say, legal name, fictitious name, on this form, and your mailing address. Now, for all practical purposes, you might not have a bricks and mortar building. You might have to use someone's personal address. That's fine. That can always be changed. That's not a problem. You just have to have a physical address, not a post office box. So the whole top part of this is explaining who you are, what your entity is, and you're acknowledging with the state, or I'm sorry, with the feds, the IRS in particular, that you are an entity recognized on a state level, and you're applying for the EIN. What is the EIN number? Basically, the EIN number is a social security number for your entity. It's a 9-digit number. I don't know if you can see. It's hard to see on the screenshot. But to the direct right of where it says California Best Life Incorporated, there is a 9-digit number. And if you look closely, I think it says something like 88-1234567. It looks like a social security number with only one hyphen. That's basically what it is. You're registering with the Internal Revenue of the birth, so to speak, of a new entity, and this is your entity's social security number. It's just called an EIN number. Does that make sense? You're registering for an EIN. You'll want this even if you're not going to have any employees. That's a moot point. Doesn't matter. You have none to start with, of course. Maybe not for the next year or two. You might have a board, but they're not employees. So file for, now this is step 3. IRS to get your EIN number, that 9 digits, basically social security number for your entities. It says Resource C. Please look at that. That is a cleaner version of a copy of, I think it's for my nonprofit, actually. And you can see it. California Best Life is not a real entity, but there is an example of a real entity in there for you to look at. It's a social security number, basically. Okay. Keep going. Let me look at the chat box, see if you have any questions. Please, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep going. All right. This is optional. IRS W-9 form. Purely optional. I'm just putting it here to make you aware as you move down the road. We did step 1, purpose, mission, and vision. Step 2, identifying your name. Step 3, going to the IRS and getting your EIN number. Step 4, optional, is to download, you don't even have to do anything, what's called a W-9 form. Have it available. Please know what it is. If your entity or soon-to-be nonprofit is going to provide any services or sell any products that are more than a certain value, then the entity that hires the nonprofit or is the recipient of the donation or the product might want you to submit what's called a W-9 form. And all that does is tell them that, again, that you are a legitimate entity, that you have an EIN. If you look at the middle of the screenshot, middle to the right, you'll see those little boxes there. That's where you would put your EIN, your AKA your social security number for your entity. And some organizations that are recipients of your service might want you to provide it. This is optional. You do not have to do it. I'm just bringing this to your attention. This is step number 4, just to be aware that W-9s might come into your life or your soon-to-be nonprofit's life somewhere down the road when you start providing a service or selling a product. So keep it in mind. Just put it aside. You don't even have to fill it out. Just know that you might do something easy to fill out. It just documents your existence. All right, so we talked about step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 is optional. That's the W-9. Step 5, articles of incorporation. Very important step for all nonprofits. And your articles of incorporation are going to look similar to your bylaws, very similar, but not as much detail. Bylaws have much more detail. Articles of incorporation, we need to go back to the state of Florida or the state of South Carolina or the state of Illinois or the state of Oklahoma. And we're going back to that same place, the State Department, and we're going to file articles of incorporation for a nonprofit. Even though you're not a nonprofit yet, you want to follow that path that the state has set up. You're not going in the path of a for-profit. Please keep that in mind. Don't make that mistake because the articles are structured differently. You want to follow the path of a nonprofit. So you're going to file articles of incorporation. Do I need to incorporate my entity? No, you do not have to, but I recommend it for a nonprofit. It makes your organization, again, more legitimate. It shows the IRS eventually that you are not a hobby. You have more than just a name. A name is great, recognized by the state, but anyone can do that, pay the fee. But articles of incorporation, you've got to go through the motions of developing, submitting, and paying the fees of the article, which brings you above the level of being just a hobby. Follow me? So is it required? No. However, incorporation helps protect you by, very, very important statement here, separating your personal assets, your assets, and anyone else that's affiliated with this organization that you have named in the involvement of it, separating that you and their personal assets from the entity's assets, if any. So let's take a look at, let's think about a worst case scenario as you're going through this process. For some inexplicable reason, you get sued or your entity gets sued. If you are incorporated, the person pursuing or entity or company pursuing you in legal terms, suing you, can only sue the entity, not you personally. And that's really what you want to do. If you're going to be involved in this soon to be nonprofit, you're going to be, this is really important for your board of directors. That they know that their personal assets, their house, their car, their investments, their everything that they own with or without spouse or significant other, their assets are protected. So incorporation does that. It separates the corporation legally, and it protects the corporation, and it protects you from your involvement, separating assets, right? Very important step. It helps to build credibility and provides a layer of protection on a state level. Now, that's what we're doing. We're back to the state to do this. It helps the IRS, again, determine that you are not a hobby. It's one of the questions the IRS will ask you when we get to that point. Have you a purpose? Do you have articles of incorporation, etc.? Attach your articles of incorporation to your application for a nonprofit. And it can also make you more legitimate. As the bottom arrow says, it can help unlock potential funding at some point. You're not there yet. You're not a nonprofit yet. But at some point, once you get that nonprofit, articles will help you get there, and they'll also make you a more powerful, legal-free entity and available for donations. Developing and submitting an entity's articles of incorporation to a state, whatever state it is a process, and it's not complicated. It establishes the entity as a legal entity, more than just a name, but a legal entity that's, that has articles. It is usually registered and approved on a state level, yes. So this is the second time you're going to be approaching the state. First time was for your name. This time it's for articles. So what does articles of incorporation look like? Let's see if we have some in here. Yep, I've got the talking points here. And there's a QR code there that shows you some other articles. It's not complicated, but you do need to know a few things that we've already talked about, the step 1, step 2, step 3 things. You'll need to know and explain in Article 1, what is your legal name of your organization? Well, your legal name, your AKA fictitious name, has been approved by the state. You should have obviously you're not going to do this until you get acknowledgement back from the state that your name's been accepted. Okay, so what is your legal name? 2, where are you located? Is it your home right now? Is it your business office? Is it the housing department right now? Where is it? You can always change that. Actually, you don't want to change your article. So you want to be as specific as you can with your location. Just, you can't use a P.O. box. It's going to have to be a physical location. All right, 3, 4, the latter ones here, 3, 4, 5, and 6, very important. Organizational structure. What is your structure? Well, you're going to be you're going to be a nonprofit organization, and your structure is you're going to have a board of directors. That's really all you need to say with that, and you'll be incorporated with a board of directors. That's it. That's all you have to explain. In fact, I have some examples in the handouts to show simple versions. This does not have to be complicated. In fact, the more simple this is, the better off you are, just like your name, keeping it simple. 4, name of the original directors. Who will be appointed as your, what they call in the state, the initial directors. You'll need at least 3. It would be ideal if those 3 initial directors are a couple things. They're going to have to be over the age of 18, and most likely, depending upon the state you're in, they might have to have legal residency in the state for your entity. So that might be a moot point, but you're going to need to have at least 3 individuals. Okay, so you're going to have to name them, right? That is your, no more, no less. You don't have to do anything more than that. Just name them. You might have to give their physical address on your articles, and that's about it. Number 5, distribution of earnings. This is in here because the IRS, again, is concerned that they want you to be more than just a hobby. So distribution of earnings and this number 6 go hand in hand, 5 and 6, dissolution. Let me talk about that, both of those. Distribution of earnings. What you're saying here with distribution of earnings is what you're saying to in your articles is you are not a for-profit organization. You are not retaining revenue to give out to board members. That's not how it's structured. Distribution of earnings, really the way it works with nonprofits, and I can give you exact verbiage on this, and there's some examples also, saying that any revenue that you generate over any expenses that you incur will be used to operate the program and will also be used to provide whatever service or product is in your purpose, vision, and mission. Make sense? It's really what you're describing in your distribution of earnings is how you're going to use those earnings or revenues, net revenues, to operate your program, operate the program. No one benefits, no individual benefits. That's the point that the IRS is looking for. That's what, again, separates you from a profit organization. Board of directors, technically with nonprofits, according to the IRS, board members do not receive a salary. They might get a stipend for travel and for expenses, but they do not. That's the role of staff. Staff, if you have any or will, receive a salary or an hourly wage. Your benefits, your leadership does not. Or if you get to the point where you hire an executive director or program manager, that person might get an hourly wage or a salary. But your leadership, your directors, and especially your 3 initial directors, do not receive. That's what they're saying. That's what they want to see in article number 5. And there's some language out there. You don't have to create this from scratch. There's some simple language out there. Okay. Dissolution, the next one, next from the bottom, number 6, means that the IRS is going to want to know if you are successful, and hopefully you will be, if you are successful in generating revenue and you have a proper distribution of those revenues, worst case scenario, dissolution means if this entity and or nonprofit fails, where does any of the accumulated earnings, where do they go? What do you do with them? So you'll have to explain in your dissolution that any earnings any revenue, don't use the word earnings, any revenues generated at the closing, if any of the entity or nonprofit, will be dispersed back to another nonprofit or back to the original donor. Okay, not to any individual, not to any board member. That the dissolution means that any earnings or any assets or other revenues and or expenses will be dispersed out to other nonprofit organizations or back to the donor. That's what it means. Again, don't worry about trying to come up with the exact language. There are boilerplate terminologies for that. The articles of incorporation are not really that complicated. Where you get into the nitty-gritty is your bylaws, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. All right, the incorporator. Basically, it's a fancy name for the person who's submitting the form. I could be your incorporator, or any of you that are putting this entity together could be your incorporator. And then look at it this way, cross out the word incorporator, even though that's the word that's used, and put point of contact. That's what incorporator means. The person filling out the form, whether it's you or an attorney's firm or anyone within the organization, it's the point of contact, the person submitting the form and the go-to person, who could also be a board member, could also be one of your original 3 board members. Follow me? So an original name of the original directors or board of directors could also be the incorporator, and that could be you, or it could be anyone else. I could do it on your behalf. I could be the incorporator, but not a board member. You know, it should be that way, actually. You should have board members that are, know the organization inside and out. All right, so I just want to point that out because we're also going to talk about bylaws, and bylaws are different than articles of incorporation. As you can see, articles of incorporation have 5, 6, 7. Basically, this is the template. 7 articles. There usually is no preamble. I don't even know what a preamble is in this case. So there's usually just 7 things: name, location, your structure, name of your directors, your distribution of earnings, if any, how you're going to dissolve and what you're going to do with any proceeds. That's number 6. And who put this whole thing together? Who's your point of contact? That's it. Playing multiple roles. You could be a board of director member and an incorporator, point of contact. And here's some examples. That's why I'm saying you want to go back and look at this. And because here's some examples. Here's the verbiage. Article 1. The name of the, and this is template stuff. This is not created from scratch. We see this a lot. It's pretty straightforward. Article 1, name of the corporation. You're not, well, hopefully you will be a corporation. You're not a corporation until your articles of incorporation are approved. So really the name of the entity, let's cross out the word corporation and put in the word entity. The name of the entity shall be, and whatever your legal name is. Number 2, your location, the place in this state, whether it's Oklahoma, Florida, where the main office will be of the entity is to be where? And you just list it. Organizational structure. Now this is boilerplate. This entity, now again, cross out the word corporation. This entity is organized exclusively for charitable, religious, educational, and scientific purposes. Why do I say those specific words? Because those are the words that the IRS uses to describe what a nonprofit is. So here early on, we're trying to mimic or set up ourselves to look like a nonprofit, even though we're not a nonprofit. So we are operating for charitable, religious, education, and or scientific purposes, including for such purposes of making distributions to other organizations that qualify as exempt under nonprofit IRS 501c3 criteria. So that's a boilerplate. You could use that. I would just change one word there, take out the word corporation and put in the word entity. You're not a corporation yet. Here's your name of your initial directors. I've got 3 very highly original people there that would be potential. And all I'm doing is naming and then putting their address there. You can tell I did this one for a tribe in California, Abby. But, you list your 3 directors. They're pretty, no more, no less at this point. They're not asking for more. This is articles of incorporation. Well, provide at least 3 names. You got to have 3, and you could be one of them. And you could also be the incorporator, as I mentioned before. Members should reside in the state. Now, you have to check with the state and see if that's a requirement, but it's a good practice that your board members would reside in Florida, in your state. Members must be 18 years. Now that's mandatory, 18 years or older. All right, name of the registered agent. As I said before, that could be you. It's parentheses, the point of contact, parentheses. It could be you. And you could also be the original board member. All right, boilerplate on distribution of earnings. No part of the net earnings of this corporation shall benefit or be distributed to its members, whatever you call them, board members, trustees, commissioners, officers, anyone that plays the role of a board of director making decisions for the organization. We are not talking staff. We're talking leadership here. The proceeds do not go to those individuals. So that's what it's saying here, as I've said before. Dissolution, boilerplate. Upon the dissolution is another word for the end of life for an entity. What are you going to do after the entity dies? The dissolution of this entity, again, assets, revenues, bills to pay, distributed to one or more other exempt organizations that have a 501c3 or back to the original donor, as I mentioned before. And the incorporator could be anybody. It could be a legal firm. It could be an accounting firm. It could be you. It could be me. It could be anyone. So that's it. Pretty simple. Now, let's see if it goes on. Before we get the bylaws, let me go back here and say one thing. You're going to do this on a state level. Highly suggested this would be step 5, right? Step 5, filing for articles of incorporation with the state for a want-to-be nonprofit entity, right? You're not a nonprofit yet, but you're moving in that direction. Step 5, file your articles. Will there be a fee? Yes. Every state will charge a fee. What's the fee? Anywhere from $100 to $150 one time. Just like your name, one-time fee with its attachments, with its add-ons that I mentioned. Get the certified copy. Here again, it might ask you, do you want some of the options added on top of it? A certified copy? Answer yes, pay the additional $10. Do you want it notarized and put on heavy stock paper, raised emblem? Yes, of course you do. Pay the additional 10 or 15 bucks. So your whole package here is $175. Put it together with your name, you're at about $325, non-refundable, out the door. And what that gives you is your name and the ability to register with the IRS to get an EIN number, and it allows you to have articles of incorporation. You are well on the path to being a nonprofit. IRS wants this as well. There's nowhere you know this until you get to the IRS, and it says, do you have a legitimate name? Can you prove it? Do you have articles? Do you have a copy? What is your state tracking number for your articles or for your name? That's why you want those copies, because they're stamped the day that the state approves your articles and approves your name. And you want that information in your board of directors startup book, right? You've got 5 things you're putting in there so far, right? 5 things in that board of directors book. Now we're up to articles of incorporation. Next step is bylaws. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Bylaws are articles of incorporation on steroids. They are taking your articles of incorporation and expanding them. You do not register bylaws. They are done on a entity level, as I say, a local level. You don't register them with the state. You don't register them with the IRS. They are mandated by the IRS. They're going to want to see it. And I suggest you follow a pattern with your, it's going to look a lot like your articles, but it's going to contain a lot more detail. It looks similar, Article 1, 2, 3, 4, your purpose, mission, and vision. That's Article 1. Now, Article 2, your name and location again. Number 3, so far it looks like your articles, right? Number 3, who are your board of directors? At least your initials, because then it'll match up with your articles. Who of those do you have officers? If you don't have officers yet, because you're still a startup entity, don't worry about it. But create an article in your bylaws that says, Officers will be appointed by the board of directors upon their need. Okay, so you've laid the groundwork. Same thing with committees. Same thing with employees. They will be assigned and hired based on the needs of the organization. And I'm looking at some of the comments, more funding on board members. Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yep. I'm just going back just for a second to look at it and see if I missed anything. How many board members should you have? 3, Leandra, 3 to start with. That's required. You can go more, but I really wouldn't. I certainly wouldn't go past 5 for a startup. Why? It's just too complicated. It's going to be hard enough to control 3 people. And the more people you add, the more complex and dynamic it gets. You can always expand. You can put this in your bylaws. Officers, board of director members. It says there can be the same people from your articles. Yes, your initial board members. And you want to maybe put a second sentence in there saying more board members will be added as needed. When? Don't know yet. We haven't determined that. We're too new to determine if we're going to go from 3 to 5. We don't know, but we're mandated to have 3. So let's start there. And those 3 actually are the officers, right? They're going to be the officers. We're going to have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary treasurer, because we only have 3 board members. We can always add. We do not use the phraseology president, vice president. That is for for-profit organizations. They use that terminology, president, vice president. We use the terminologies chair, chairwoman, chairman, chairperson, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, and then, of course, any other things that come along down the road. So your officers probably will be also your board members. But as time goes on, you're going to change your bylaws to grow with your organizations. That makes sense? This is what we're looking at here is bare bones. Just enough information with your officers. You don't have committees yet. You don't have employees yet. But you want to carve out that space in Article 5 and 6 saying, we don't have committees. Committees will be added at the discretion of board members, period. Employees will be added at the discretion of the board, period. You do not have to have committees right immediately. You do not have to have employees immediately, because what are they going to do? You're brand new. You have no revenues to account for. You might have a little bit of expense, startup expense, but kind of reserve the space, so to speak, for Article 5 and 6. Even Article 7 at the bottom, what could be in miscellaneous? Bank accounts, things like that. Where you're going to do your banking at if you get to that point. How many signatures you're going to have on your checks if you're going to be writing checks, if anyone writes checks these days. 1 signature, 2, etc. Those are all miscellaneous things. What kind of fiscal year are you going to have? That's all miscellaneous stuff to start with. Are you going to be on a fiscal year or calendar year? We don't know. You probably want to match it up with the tribe or match it up with your funding. You might go October 1st to September 30th with a fiscal year. And if that's the case, you can say that. You can always change it. But that would put you in sync with the federal grant cycles of October 1st through September 30th. So miscellaneous can contain all those kind of things, and they can be expanded on. Don't worry. Don't make this too complicated to start with. You can always make changes. You don't want to make changes to your articles. You want to go in pretty straightforward. Remember, there's only like 5 things on your articles. The state is only concerned about 5 things. What is your name? Where are you located? Who your board members are? What are you going to do with your revenues? How are you going to dissolve? What are you going to do with the proceeds that you dissolve? And who put the whole thing together? 5 things on the articles. Bylaws are the minutia. This is your operating manual here. Your bylaws can change. They'll get more complex over time. So start simple. Use the boilerplate template. Do not make it too complicated to start with. And here's some examples. We talked about the purpose. The purpose of these bylaws shall be to protect the interest of, and the name of your entity. Okay, straightforward, one long sentence there, that's it. And then you can get into listing, if you wish, in your article number 1, your purpose, mission, if you have that much detail. No, you can always add it later. Article 2, where the name of the organization and the location. You can say that's Article 2, and here's just more examples of Article 2A, name, location, nothing fancy. Board of directors. You've already set the template with your articles. You know about the board of directors. You're only going with 3 to start with, 5 at the most for a startup. No more than that is my recommendation. All right, so board of directors, again, here they are again, visiting, and miscellaneous stuff. You can, or actually this is included with board of directors. This does not need to be in here. This is where you might want to go down the road when you start having more operational concerns. You revise your bylaws to show power structure, how you're going, what your directors are going to do, and how they're going to operate. Because folks, at some point, especially if you get nonprofit status, at some point you're going to have to delineate what your board of director members do. At first, they're going to be doing everything. They are an operational board, right? Whether you're 3 or 5 of them, they're doing everything. Then at some point, as the organization matures, the board members take a different path. They transition from an operational board to a governing board and make policy and procedure. It's at that point where you probably bring on a staff member, and that would be the next article here. As I recall, that should be here. Well, this is more on board members. But officers, and then after that, we get into committees and staff. Once these officers start, the functions are maturing, the revenue possibly is coming in, board of directors members can step back from day-to-day operation and move towards governance, policy creation, strategic planning, which is where they should be going. And every board of directors should be moving towards strategic planning, designing the plan and keeping their hands out of day-to-day. Once board members get to that point where the organization can kind of move in that direction, then board members can follow the governance and staff can handle day-to-day. But that's going to be a slow process. All right. But that can be built in to your bylaws. Right now, you don't, going back a little bit, you don't have all these details in your bylaws because you're still a startup. Your board of directors, go way back here. Your board of directors, your 3 or 5, they do everything at first, everything, because, unless you've got some volunteers, they basically do everything. But at a point, they're going to separate and they're going to, as it says in that bottom paragraph, move from operation to governance. And it's at that point where staff, even part-time staff, comes on board, whether it be a program director or a finance person, and so on. Okay, so still on board. Here's your officers. Well, your officers and board members to start with are going to be the same 3 people. If you have a 5-member board, then you're going to have to make a decision. Who of the 3 of the 5 are going to be officers and who are just going to be members at large? That's why I'm saying start with 3, because then you can have a chair, a vice chair, and secretary treasurer or something like that. Then you add as you progress here, chair, vice chair, secretary treasurer. Sophisticated because it goes into past presidents and others. You're not there yet. We can add that. Committees, you're not there yet. The committees of the entity shall be, and there's a couple listed there, but I would simplify this in saying Article 5, committees. The committees will, don't even name them. Committees will be added at the discretion, as needed, at the discretion of the board of directors, period. It's too soon to name committees. You don't have any of these functions. So naming them would be a moot point. Don't do that. Same thing with employees, as I mentioned before. Employees will be hired as needed at the discretion of the board of directors. The ones below the bullet items are just examples. You do not have to follow that pattern. They do not have to necessarily be full-time. They could be part-time. Bookkeeper coming on board. Doesn't really matter. Hold on, folks. Okay. Had to check my notes again, or I checked the comment box. Weird. Public chat. Okay, here we go. Cool. Okay, very good. Okay, doing great. I'm gonna try to go through here quickly. This is the basic information. I know there's just a lot of ground to cover here. Miscellaneous, no need. I mean, you can reserve it. Miscellaneous could be a lot of things. Your fiscal years, I mentioned before, and a variety of things. There, bank selection, checking accounts, deposits, all those can be determined down the road. You want to reserve miscellaneous as an article area. Maybe the only thing you'd want to put in there right out the beginning would be your fiscal year, as I mentioned before. Okay, very important. 5 steps here that lay the groundwork of moving in the direction of a nonprofit. And if you will allow me, I know we're running, there's just a lot of material here and I want to make sure we get through it. I'm going to keep going unless you have questions. I don't see any at the moment. Can a board member be moved to the position of CEO or director? They sure can, but that's down the road. You know, if you have a CEO, that means you're going to have to pay someone to be a CEO. And it would make sense that a board member could transition from board member, but you would want to make sure you have a job description for your board of director members and job description for your CEOs so that there's no stepping on any toes, so to speak. And if you're going to take a board member and transition them into CEO down the road or program director or whatever, yes, that can happen. It's going to need board approval. It can happen, but you also now move into the range of salaries. You're going to have paid staff. So I question whether a startup would be ready for that transition. Yes, you can do it. Yes, you can change your bylaws if you at any point to do that, no problem. Angelica Bylaws Manual of Operation. Yes, that's exactly what it is. You can change your bylaws from time to time, although I don't recommend it. It will grow with you. What, as I mentioned before, what you never really want to change are your articles, because that's a much more detailed process and you're involving the state and fees and certified copies. So try to get those articles correct the first time. Go with it. That's why you want to keep it simple. Your bylaws, on the other hand, is your roadmap, your day-to-day, your minutia. You can change it. But even your bylaws, you don't want to change your bylaws every time the board comes together. No, you want to create bylaws and then maybe once a year change them as the program morphs and make significant changes. Policies and procedures that are approved by the board and mentioned in the bylaws, those are things that you change as needed on a daily basis. Your policies and procedures. That's your day-to-day changes. All right, let's just move through some of this stuff quickly. Other things that you might want to consider. We talked about the big 5. 6 would be insurance, especially errors and omissions. Errors and omissions usually referred to as E and O, capital E and capital O. Errors and omissions covers the decisions made by your board of directors. Someone doesn't like the decision made by your board for the scholarship that they're going to give. They sue the entity. That insurance covers that. So you'd want to go to an insurance company that specializes in small entities that want to talk to general liability insurance, particularly errors and omissions, that cover the decisions of the board of directors and the decisions they make. You don't, for the most part, you probably don't have a physical building. If you do, then you're going to have to get into the general liability insurance, protect against falls and things like that. Yes. And these are just some examples. Got examples of all that stuff for you to look at. Legal obligations. Let me just walk through that. Now we're talking board of directors. Pretty straightforward stuff. I'm going to just put it in front of you as we move through. Duty of care. Board of directors have, and this is straightforward, this is leadership stuff. They have a duty of care. they have several things they have to be aware of. The duty of care, to be responsible, due diligence, do what's best for the organization. Little explanation on duty of care. Then we get into breach of care. We don't want to have a breach of care. And again, this is where your insurance will help you too, to protect the organization for a board member that decides he doesn't like your entity anymore and starts doing things that work against, saying bad things about the entity in a public forum, for example. That would be a breach of duty of care. So you want to protect yourself from those kind of things, even though they're rare. Duty of loyalty, that this entity, if you're going to follow through on this, that the entity is, you're loyal to the entity, and board members do what is best for the entity and do not work against it. So a lot of the conflict of interest would be the big one. You want to have policies and procedures like any entity would. You don't have, well, you would mention this in your bylaws, of course, duty of care, duty of end, but you'd also have probably policies and procedures, or maybe a code of conduct down the road, or conflict of interest that board members and or staff would sign off on, boilerplate stuff that there would be no conflict of interest. Here's some examples. QR code that can take you to different locations. Duty of obedience, to make sure, again, that board members, if they're signing on as a board member, duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience is number 3, or A, B, and C under the duties of board members. Pretty straightforward stuff for any board member. And here's some characteristics. That's Eleanor Rigby right there. Navajo, Dene, Steamboat chapter to be specific. Board of Director, Chairwoman, 2024. She's active right now, the California Best Life nonprofit. Woohoo! And here's some of the things that she and all board members need to be aware of. The vision and leadership, number 1. Number 2, their advocacy, stewardship of the proceeds in the organization and its assets. Their integrity at the bottom, of course, their knowledge. Over in the right, personal commitment and diligent. And of course, hopefully, if they're going to be speaking on behalf of the organization or entity, their congeniality, being able to work with different audiences. Vision and leadership. This is just a description of the very things I was just talking about, making sure they have leadership skills, the vision. And there are just some examples here. You could go back and go over, I'm not going to go over each and every one of these. Advocacy, stewardship of the funds they're responsible for, integrity, protecting the assets of the organization, good, as they used to call it, shepherding. Now it's stewardship of the proceeds and assets, the integrity of the officers, making sure that, and the knowledge, making sure that they are committed. This is where the code of conduct and conflict of interest policies. Board of director, keep this in mind, board of director members, just like any employee or any organization, should have a job description, as I mentioned before, and should have a code of conduct and, an anti-conflict of interest, just like any employee would for any, and you probably did for the tribe that you're working for. Same thing. If you're going to have directors, you might as well have job descriptions. And it would answer the question that came up, the really good question from Leandra on a board member transitioning to a CEO or board, that if you need to be able to delineate the responsibilities of a board member from a staff member. Keep in mind that new board members they do everything at first. It's only after the organization matures and the board goes into more of a governance standpoint, then that's the point when we would be talking about hiring a CEO or a program director or a finance person. So job descriptions are needed as much as anything else. Okay, we talked about commitment, diligence, talked about personal commitment. This is more on that, kind of going over that quite a bit, but I want to move through here and see if there's any. Okay, let's finish up. I'm going a little late here, but give me about 10 minutes and I'll move through. We're to the point now. We've gone through the 5 steps, right? From purpose, vision, and mission that's it, 1, 2, selecting the name and locking in with the state on the name. 3 was going to the IRS to get the EIN number, and that basically the social security number for your entity. That was step 3. 4 was the W-9, that was optional. 5 was your articles of incorporation, right? Going back to the state and getting your articles, paying the fee, locking in. Now you have a legitimate entity and article. You're basically incorporated now. You're an incorporated entity. Assets are separated. The entity, even though it doesn't have any assets yet, assets will be separated, and your personal assets and the assets of your other board members will be segregated. And that's what we want. Now we've done all this. Now we need to do 2 things. Before we go to the apply for the nonprofit status, we want to have a fundraising plan. We want to have a board of directors meeting first, have a board of directors meeting of the 3, and approve everything we've done so far. All 5 steps that I mentioned to you. That's the first plan of action that that board member has had. Agree, approve the name, approve the articles and everything so far. Approve the insurance, approve the bylaws. That's the first thing. First board of directors meeting with their manual in front of them. First call of action, approve what those 5 steps. Step number 6, approve a fundraising plan. They've got to have a plan. The IRS is going to ask you in your application, what plan do you have to raise funds? Because that's what you're all about. And every board member has an obligation, right? We just talked about their obligations. So number 6 is develop a fundraising plan and think it through. Develop it. Don't come in cold. Come into your board meeting with a plan, think it through, and then approve it. Okay, got to have a fundraising plan. How are you going to generate funds? Are you going to do donations? Are you going to do fundraising drives? Are you going to search grants? You know, you got to try to define that, and that's not easy. But you got to come up with a fundraising plan that that you can agree upon and the board can approve. Okay, so that's really 7 things. The 5 moving parts that I talked about. Number 6 is the board meeting. Number 7 is the fundraising plan. All right, so we got 7 things so far. You put all those 7 steps together over time. I want to say you could do this in about 3 months if you haven't already, and do it properly. Right? Now you do all that and you're ready for step number 8, and that is approaching the IRS. But before you willy-nilly go to the IRS and say, hey, we want to be a nonprofit, because Vince says we've done all these 6 steps, 7 actually, and we're ready. You're not ready. You're going to have to go through what's called, and I would really suggest going to the irs.gov and downloading the IRS application for the 501c3 application, which is referred to, please write this down if I don't have it on here, the short form. Just like the short form on the taxes we used to do as kids, as opposed to the long form, the IRS nonprofit application has a short form and they have a long form. We want to qualify for the short form because it is 3 pages as opposed to 30 in your application. So how do we do that? We download what's called the IRS nonprofit questionnaire for the IRS 501c3 nonprofit application questionnaire. Download that along with the 501c3 application short form. Those 2 things. Okay. And you go through the questionnaire. There are 26 questions. 27. No, wait a minute. 2 things. 26 questions on the form. Yes or no, basically. Yes or no questions. And the clock starts ticking. That's what the bottom thing it says at the bottom. Keep in mind, if you want to file IRS Form 1023, that's the actual form for nonprofit, short form, you have 27 months from the date of the establishment of your articles of incorporation to submitting. So plenty of time, right? A little more than 2 years should be able to pull this off. but there are 26 questions on that survey. And we want to answer it so we can avoid doing the traditional IRS Form 1023, the long form. We want to do the easy way, as it says down at the bottom, complete the 1023. That's the actual form, 1023 easy, 2 to 3 pages submitted online. But you've got to answer yes to all of the 26 questions on the survey. So what do they ask you on that survey? The first 3 questions, let me just go through this, and we'll be able to wrap this up in 5 or 10 minutes. The first 3 questions are going to be related to, the first one is, have your annual gross receipts, your revenues, exceeded $50,000, or will they or did they in any of the past 3 years? Well, that answer should be no, because you're brand new. You're a new entity. You're not a nonprofit. You have no proceeds, right? So less than $50,000. That's the first of 26 questions. The second and third question. Second question, do you project that those revenues will exceed $50,000 in the next 3 years? I strongly recommend that you say no. Even if you're optimistic and you're the best grant writer in the world, say no, because if you say yes to this question, you'll get kicked out and you will be told you got to do the long form. And that's what we're trying to resolve. We're trying to avoid. So do you project annual gross receipts to exceed $50,000 in the next 3 years? No. Do you have total assets with a fair market value in excess of $250,000? No. You basically are going to say no to all 26 questions. Now it's going to go on from those first 3. Those are the first 3 are the big 3. Then it's going to go on and ask you questions that might not seem like a whole lot of sense. The remaining 24 or 23 or 24 questions revolve. They're narrowing down the field. First of all, they want to make sure, question 4, 5, 6, 7, that you're not a foreign entity. And that you are not a hobby. That's why we went through steps 1 through 5, right? To show them we're not a hobby. The remaining questions focus around, they're trying to make sure that, or not make sure, but make sure that you are not a church or what do they call it? Faith-based organization, or any other type of nonprofit entity. A school, a traditional school, like a middle school or high school, has its own classification. So do colleges. There's a lot of different nonprofit entities, insurance related, education related, science related. So the series of questions, keep in mind, all 26 of them, you must answer no. But you can go through it and you'll see that they want to make sure you're not a for-profit organization or want to be. You're not a church. You're not a school. You're not an insurance organization. You're not a benefit package, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you would answer no to all these. And I think a lot of them are here. Number 9, are you currently recognized as tax exempt under another different IRS classification? Hope not, because you're a brand new entity. You would answer no. You're not a C6 or a C9 or some of those other things. Are you a church? Are you a hospital? No. Again, no. Are you a school or a university? Now, if you are a tribal, if you are a tribal college or tribal university, tribal college, we need to talk about this question. But for the most part, you are not. You would answer no to this. Are you applying for exemption as a qualified charitable risk pool? No. Are you classified as a supporting organization under different codes? No. Substantial purpose of your activity to provide assistance through credit counseling activities? No. Do you sell or intend to sell carbon credits? No. All right. I'm sorry, Adrian. We're going to finish here. The short answers is you'd answer no to all this to be qualified for the short form, and then you'd submit that. Adrian, you can reach out if you get more information on that, but let me finish up. You get the gist of it now. We're answering no to all this. all 26 of those questions because we want to qualify for the short form. And this is the short form. And the short form is very straightforward as opposed to the long form. And folks, that's what you're trying to do, not have to do the long form. You want to do the short form. And it's like it says, it's 2 pages. But you've got to have all those mechanisms in place that I talked about, all 5 steps. And you've got to have that plan for that fundraising plan in place as well. Okay. And these are just the questions that are coming up, on the actual form. What is your date of incorporation? Did you have bylaws improved? Yes. Yes to all that. Who are your officers? Doesn't this sound familiar? Yeah, we've done all this. There's the screenshot of the actual application. Very straightforward, 2 pages. 3 pages and a half. That's it. And then you get a determination letter with the short form that usually comes within a 2 to 3 week time period, as opposed to the 2 or 3 month with a long form. The letter looks something like that. You get a letter and acknowledgement. Then from that, the world opens up. Then you can apply for state sales tax exemption in the state that you've applied, that you're doing business for. It's getting that exemption that opens these doors. Not only do you, as the entity nonprofit now, able to get sales tax exemption for the products and services you purchase, but your donors to you also have the advantage of providing contributions to a nonprofit tax exempt organization. And that opens up a world of donations plus grants and cooperative agreements on a federal, state level. Okay. I apologize for going over a few minutes. I really do. I see Brooke has pushed through the survey. Thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it back over for Brooke. I apologize for the 11 minutes over, Brooke, but just a lot of good detail here. Brooke, back to you.
No, absolutely, Vince. No worries at all. Always fine if you go over, you're just sharing important information, like you said. But as Vince noted, I did put the link to today's webinar feedback for you into the chat, y'all. If you don't mind taking a few minutes to do that for us. Like I always say, they don't have your name or your email attached to them. It's completely anonymous. It's just some questions to let us at the Native Learning Center know what's working, what can be improved upon. It gives you opportunities to suggest topics that we can try to get on the calendar in the future. And it is also feedback that we share with our instructors. So it does help all 3 of us who are involved in this webinar journey together. If you could please do that for me. It's right there in the chat. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. That is going to be in a couple of days on Thursday. This one will be leadership skills for survivors. Sorry. Leadership skills for supervisors. That'll be with Dr. William Latchford. If you have been tuning in for his leadership series so far this year, it's been really great. This I think is like the 7th installment. So you have time to go into our courses section and pull up the leadership course and play catch up with some of the ones you've missed so far. They're all different topics, but they come together really lovely. You would sign in just like you did today. Click on that green banner, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, or 10 a.m. Alaska. Feel free to check out this as well as our other recorded webinars on our YouTube channel. There's a whole playlist called the Cathedra Webinar Archive. And of course, YouTube is a free resource for you to use. So I encourage you to check out all the recordings that we have on there. And if you ever need help finding something on a specific topic, you can shoot me an email, which I've just put in the chat for you. We hope you can check out our other upcoming events. We post about them to our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. And we do have an in-house produced podcast, the Hope of Being a Native American podcast, where you can listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. Otherwise, that is all we have for you today, folks. Again, so sorry to have gone over our usual time, but it is incredibly valuable information. Anybody who had to tap out early, you can always check out the recording when it generates tomorrow morning. But otherwise, I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the day, rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much, Vince.